The Carthos Rift was not a battlefield anymore. It was a tomb. Ships from 17 civilizations drifted in silent ruin, their broken hulls forming a dead constellation across the darkness. Some still flickered with failing emergency lights. Others had been cut clean in half, as if something enormous had passed through them without even slowing down. Commander Relic of the Tarsan Republic stood on the observation deck of the Alliance command station, staring at the ruin with eyes that had long stopped believing in victory. 12 years. That was how long the war had lasted. 12 years of retreat, broken alliances, and last stands that turned into massacres. The Velkar Dominion did not negotiate, did not hesitate, and did not forgive resistance. It expanded like a disease across the galaxy, silent, efficient, and absolute. Entire species had once vowed to hold the line. Now their names were only remembered in casualty logs. Behind Relic, the command deck was chaos disguised as discipline. Officers spoke in low, exhausted voices. Tactical displays showed incoming Dominion fleets, again, larger than anything they had ever repelled. No one argued any more about strategy. Only survival time. Outer shield fleets are gone, an officer reported quietly. Another added without looking up, "We lost contact with the Truz 9 blockade an hour ago. They didn't even send a final transmission." Relic clenched his claws, and the evacuation routes. A pause. They're already compromised. That was the moment it truly sank in. There was nowhere left to run. One of the younger officers broke the silence. "We should initiate full surrender protocols. Maybe the Dominion will accept partial governance. Some species survived that way." A bitter laugh came from the side of the room. "No one survives the Dominion," an older commander said. "They don't want obedience, they want silence." Relic didn't respond. His eyes stayed on the rift, on the floating graves of everything they had lost. Then the sensors flickered. A new signal appeared. At first, no one reacted. The rift was full of debris signatures, ghost echoes, false readings, but the technician froze mid-motion. Commanders." Relic didn't turn. "What is it?" "We're detecting a ship." That finally made him look. "Alliance reinforcement." The technician hesitated. "No, sir." The room slowly quieted. The technician swallowed. Single vessel, unknown configuration, no Dominion registry, no Alliance ID. Relic narrowed his eyes. "Pirates." "No, sir." A pause stretched too long. Then the technician spoke again, quieter this time. "It's human." The word hit the room like a physical impact. For a moment, nobody moved. Then chaos erupted. Humans are extinct in this sector. They abandoned the war years ago. Their core worlds were glassed. There's nothing left to send a ship. Relic raised a claw sharply. Silence returned, but it was fragile. "Confirm again," he ordered. The technician rechecked the signature. His hands trembled slightly. "It's real, Commander. One vessel approaching the rift at high velocity." Relic exhaled slowly, put it on screen. The main display shifted. Space folded open, and the ship appeared. It did not look like any Alliance vessel. It was too large, too dense, too deliberate. A vast black structure of layered armor plates and angular geometry, as if something had built a fortress and then decided to teach it how to move. Its hull carried no insignia visible at first glance. Only faint markings, worn, scarred, almost ancient. "The Eternum." Relic felt something uneasy settle in his chest. "Why is it alone?" someone whispered. As if answering the question, Dominion fleets entered firing range. Without hesitation, they opened fire. Thousands of plasma beams lanced through space, converging on the human ship. The rift lit up like a dying star. Impact followed instantly. The Eternum vanished beneath explosions. Debris fields ignited, sensors overloaded. Alliance officers stepped back instinctively as shockwaves rippled across the station. For several seconds, nothing remained visible. An officer exhaled shakily. "It's gone." Relic didn't respond. He kept staring, because something about the silence was wrong. No wreckage drifted. No emergency signals screamed. No human distress call ever came. Just emptiness. Then, the fire began to move. Not dissipate. Move. Like something inside it was pushing outward. The flames split apart as if torn by invisible hands. And through the burning storm, the Eternum emerged, unharmed, unshaken, as if the attack had never mattered at all. The entire command station fell silent. Even the Dominion fleet hesitated. For the first time in the war, they did not immediately fire again. Relic's voice came out low. That ship just survived a full fleet volley. Before anyone could answer, the human warship activated its weapons. A single energy spike built at its core. No warning. No build-up the Alliance could interpret. Just inevitability. And then it fired. Across the rift, 3 Dominion battleships ceased to exist. Not destroyed. Erased. Space where they had been flickered violently, as if reality itself had forgotten they were ever there. Relic stepped back instinctively. What is that thing? Then the Eternum transmitted a signal. A calm human voice echoed across every channel. This is the human warship Eternum. A pause. You are ordered to clear the battlefield. Relic's eyes widened. Ordered. Before he could respond, the Dominion fleet opened fire again, fully committing. And deep within the human ship, something began to wake up completely. The Dominion did not believe in anomalies. If something survived a full fleet barrage, it was not unusual. It was a target that required more firepower. Across the Carthos Rift, hundreds of Dominion warships reoriented in perfect synchronization. Their formations were not chaotic like the Alliance fleets. They were engineered, almost mechanical in precision, each vessel acting like a cell in a single enormous organism. Commander Relic watched them through the tactical display with a sinking feeling. They're escalating, he said quietly. An officer beside him shook his head. No, they're correcting. Correcting what? The fact that it's still alive. On the main screen, the Eternum drifted through space like a black wound in reality. It had not changed position. It had not reacted to the renewed targeting locks forming around it. It simply existed. Then the Dominion fired again. This time, the attack was different. Not a scattered volley, but a unified beam array. Thousands of synchronized energy weapons converged into a single column of annihilation. The rift itself illuminated like a newborn star as the attack struck the human warship directly. For a moment, everything disappeared. Sensors overloaded, visual feeds fractured, even gravitational readings spiked violently. Alliance officers instinctively shielded their eyes. That's it, someone whispered. Nothing survives that. Relic didn't answer. He couldn't look away. The fire burned for several seconds longer than physics should have allowed. Space itself seemed to vibrate under the pressure of the Dominion's combined assault. Then, slowly, the beam began to fade. A silence followed. A heavy, suffocating silence. Then the rift cleared. The Eternum was still there. But now something had changed. Not damage. Not movement. Presence. It felt closer, heavier, like the ship had stepped forward in response to being struck. One technician swallowed hard. It didn't even flinch. Another voice broke in sharply. Check heat signatures, hull integrity. No readings, the technician replied, confused. It's like the energy never touched it. Relic felt a cold certainty form in his chest. That wasn't defense, he said quietly. That was absorption. On the Dominion side, confusion turned into controlled alarm. Their fleets reconfigured again, attempting to compensate. Shield matrices were reinforced. Secondary weapon systems came online. Entire flotillas began repositioning into layered attack grids. They were preparing to erase the anomaly properly. But the Eternum moved first. It did not accelerate. It did not warp. It simply repositioned, as if space had agreed to place it somewhere else. One moment it was outside the Dominion formation. The next it was inside it. Right in the center. Relic's eyes widened. No warp signature, how did it? He stopped, because the answer did not matter. 14 Dominion cruisers vanished in the same instant. No explosions followed. No debris. Just empty space where they had been, as if reality had quietly deleted them mid-existence. Panic spread across the Dominion formation for the first time. Their disciplined structure faltered. A few ships broke alignment, others fired blindly into the void. Their perfect synchronization began to fracture under something they could not predict. On the Alliance station, officers were no longer speaking. They were just watching. The human warship was not fighting like anything they understood. It was rewriting the rules of engagement. Relic leaned forward slightly. How is it selecting targets so fast? A tactical officer shook his head. It's not selecting, it's reacting faster than command latency allows. Another officer whispered, it's like it already knows what they're going to do. Then the human voice returned across all channels. Still calm. Still emotionless. Warnings. Every Alliance screen flickered. 30 seconds until escalation threshold. Relic froze. Escalation threshold. What does that mean? Someone asked. No answer came. Because at that exact moment, the Eternum stopped drifting. Its hull began to split. Not breaking apart, but unfolding. Hidden sections rotated outward from within the massive structure. Layers of armor shifted like mechanical plates waking from sleep. Deep within its core, something vast began to ignite, an internal system so large it distorted nearby space as it powered up. And then the Dominion commander made a decision. A desperate one. All fleets full convergence fire now. Every surviving ship in the sector turned toward the human vessel. Every weapon system locked on. Every engine pushed to maximum output. The Carthos Rift became a single unified weapon aimed at one ship. And the Eternum did not retreat. It finished waking up. The moment the Eternum completed its activation sequence, the entire battlefield changed tone. Not visually. Structurally. It was as if space itself had stopped behaving like a neutral environment and started acting like something owned. Inside the Alliance command station, alarms that had been blaring for hours suddenly shifted pitch, lower, heavier, almost strained. Systems were no longer reacting to damage or enemy movement. They were reacting to presence. Commander Relic felt it in his bones. This isn't a ship powering up, he said slowly. This is something being allowed to exist at full capacity. A technician turned sharply. Commander, we're losing passive sensor clarity across the entire rift. What does that mean? It means we can't tell what's happening unless it wants us to. Relic didn't respond immediately. On the main display, the Eternum stood at the center of the Dominion fleet's convergence. Hundreds of warships surrounded it now, forming layered attack rings. It should have been impossible for a single vessel to survive that density of fire. And yet no one fired. Not yet. Because something about the human ship had changed the instinct of every sensor operator watching it. It no longer looked like prey. It looked like containment. Then the Dominion commander gave the order. All fleets fire simultaneously. For a fraction of a second, there was hesitation across thousands of ships. Then discipline took over. The rift ignited. Energy weapons of every type converged. Plasma lances, gravitic disruptors, antimatter pulses, phase shift beams. The attack was so massive it briefly distorted the visible starfield, bending light into unnatural arcs. The Eternum was swallowed instantly. A second passed. Then two. Alliance officers began to speak again, voices shaky with forced hope. No vessel can survive that concentration. It's over. Relic did not move. He had stopped trusting over. The explosion lasted longer than expected. Space shimmered violently, as if something inside the blast zone was resisting being defined as destroyed. The Dominion fleets held their formation, continuing sustained fire until their weapons systems reached thermal limits. Only then did they begin to slow. The fire faded, and silence returned. The Eternum was gone, or at least invisible beneath the aftermath. Debris clouds drifted. Energy residue shimmered. Even the Dominion commander seemed to relax slightly. Then, the debris moved. Not outward, inward, like a tide revering itself. The remnants of the attack were being pulled toward a single point in space. Relic's eyes narrowed. That's not gravity. The technician whispered, it's organizing it. The center of the rift darkened. Not from destruction, but from compression. Then the Eternum reappeared. Not damaged. Not altered. Closer. Much closer. It had moved deeper into the Dominion formation, without any detectable transition. And now something else was visible. The hull was no longer simply a structure. It was layered. Sections of it had opened like armored petals, revealing internal corridors of light and machinery that defied standard engineering classifications. Massive energy conduits pulsed beneath its surface like veins. And at its core, something enormous had awakened. A low-frequency pulse rolled across space. Every Dominion ship in range flickered at the same time. Systems briefly desynchronized. Shields dropped for fractions of seconds. It was enough. The Eternum struck. Not with a beam, not with a projectile, but with a directed spatial collapse. 4 Dominion cruisers simply ceased alignment with reality. Their hulls did not explode. They misaligned, breaking apart into scattered fragments that drifted without inertia, as if the concept of cohesion had been deleted. Panic finally spread through the Dominion formation. Relic's voice sharpened. They're breaking formation. That's impossible for them, another officer said. Their command structure doesn't allow panic responses. Then it's not panic, Relic replied. It's confusion. On the Dominion flagship, internal systems struggled to maintain coherence. Tactical overlays flickered. Targeting solutions recalculated endlessly without reaching stability. The commander shouted orders, but the fleet was no longer responding as a single entity. It was reacting individually. And that had never happened before. Inside the Eternum, something shifted again. The human voice returned. But this time it was different. Slightly lower. Heavier. Human War Protocol Sigma engaged. Alliance officers exchanged confused looks. Sigma, someone asked. We've never heard that classification. A technician's face went pale. I'm not even finding reference architecture for it in known Alliance data systems. Relic stepped closer to the display. What does Sigma mean? No answer came from the human ship. Instead, it moved again. Instantly, inside the Dominion formation. 3 capital ships disappeared before they even registered the approach. And then the Eternum stopped moving entirely. It hovered at the center of the enemy fleet, like a judgment waiting to finalize itself. The Dominion commander finally spoke again. All remaining vessels, prepare Relic-class response. That sentence made the Alliance officers freeze. Relic turned sharply. Relic-class, what is that? No one answered fast enough. Because deep within the Dominion formation, something ancient had begun to power on. And the Eternum had already detected it. The battlefield was no longer a battle. It was a calculation waiting to resolve. At the center of the Carthos rift, the Eternum hung motionless, surrounded by what remained of the Dominion fleet. The formation that once represented absolute dominance now looked fractured, less like an army and more like a swarm that had lost its queen. But the Dominion did not believe in defeat. Not yet. Inside the flagship command sphere, alarms pulsed in slow, rhythmic cycles. The Dominion commander stood rigidly in front of a holographic projection that flickered with instability. Relic-class asset is online, an officer reported. A heavy silence followed. Then another voice, tense and uncertain. We are authorized to deploy it only under extinction conditions. The commander's jaw tightened. This is extinction. Across the rift, the Eternum remained still. Too still. Relic watched the human ship carefully, unease growing in his chest. Why isn't it attacking? A technician frowned at the readings. It's waiting. For what? No one answered. Because at that exact moment, space behind the Dominion fleet folded inward. It did not open like a normal warp gate. It collapsed, like reality itself had been crushed into a singular point and forced to invert. From that rupture, something emerged. Massive, ancient, wronged. A structure larger than entire planetary defense grids drifted into existence. Its surface was not metal or energy, but something in between, shifting, unstable geometry that hurt to look at directly. It absorbed light instead of reflecting it, leaving a void-shaped impression in space. The Relic-class weapon. The Dominion's last answer. Alliance officers stared in horror. That's not a ship, one whispered. It's older than their empire, another said. Look at the design architecture, nothing in modern physics matches that. Relic felt his throat tighten. They've been hiding that. The Relic-class construct rotated slowly, aligning itself toward the Eternum. And then it fired. The attack was not energy in the conventional sense. It was erasure pressure, a wave that did not destroy matter but removed its permission to exist. Space between the weapon and the human ship began to distort violently, as if reality itself was being overwritten. Alliance sensors screamed. Entire readouts failed simultaneously. On the tactical display, the Eternum flickered. For the first time since its arrival, it reacted. A containment field erupted around it, not defensive, but stabilizing. The space around the human ship hardened, locking itself into coherence against the incoming wave. The Relic-class pulse struck. And stopped. Not absorbed. Not deflected. Stopped. Like it had hit something that refused to be defined as a target. A stunned silence spread across every channel. Relic stepped forward slightly. It blocked it. A technician shook his head rapidly. That's not possible. That weapon doesn't interact, it unmakes. Then why is it still there? Relic demanded. No answer came. Because the Relic-class construct fired again. And again, each pulse stronger than the last. Each one distorting more of the rift. Space began to fracture around the battlefield. Distant stars flickered as if reality was being strained beyond tolerance. The Dominion fleet, once confident, now held position in uneasy anticipation. But the Eternum did not retreat. It began to respond. Slowly at first, then with intent. A new structure unfolded from its hull, thin lattice arrays extending into space like invisible frameworks being drawn in real time. These were not weapons in the traditional sense. They were rules being enforced onto the battlefield. The Relic-class weapon fired again. This time, the pulse did not reach the Eternum. It bent, curved, redirected, and struck one of the Dominion support clusters instead. The entire formation vanished in a silent collapse. The Dominion commander's voice broke for the first time. That was a misfire, correct trajectory immediately. But the weapon did not obey. It was no longer fully under control. The Eternum had altered the battlefield logic itself. Relic's eyes widened. It's not just defending, it's rewriting the engagement rules. Another officer whispered, "What kind of ship does that?" The answer came seconds later. The Eternum moved. Not toward the Relic-class construct. Not toward the fleet. But through it. Space did not tear. It simply accepted the movement. The Relic-class weapon shuddered violently as internal systems began to destabilize. Its surface cracked with shifting light patterns, as if it was suddenly unsure how to define its own structure. For the first time, the Dominion commander sounded afraid. Reinforce containment, do not let IT adapt. But it was too late. Inside the human ship, something aligned. A low, synchronized tone echoed across all Alliance channels. And the Eternum spoke again. Not calmly, not neutrally, but with final certainty. Target classified as adaptive threat. A pause. Nullification authorized. Relic's breath caught. Nullification. Before anyone could interpret it, the Eternum released a single pulse. Not energy, not matter. A command. The relic-class weapon froze mid-output. Then, for the first time since its activation, it stopped existing as an active system. Across the battlefield, Dominion systems went dark. Entire ships lost synchronization. Command structures collapsed into silence. And the relic-class construct drifted motionless, dead in space, no longer responding to anything at all. Alliance officers stared in disbelief. What just happened? Relic didn't answer immediately. Because the human ship had not finished. It was still there. Still active. Still watching the remaining Dominion fleet. And then across all channels, the human voice returned one final time. This engagement is no longer classified as resistance. A pause. It is classified as termination. And deep inside the Dominion fleet, something far larger than the relic-class weapon began to awaken in response. The word termination did not echo like a threat. It settled like a verdict already decided long ago. Across the Carthos rift, silence spread through the Dominion fleet, not the silence of peace, but the silence of systems no longer confident in their own stability. Entire warships floated motionless for fractions of seconds as their command layers struggled to reconcile what they were witnessing. The relic-class weapon had gone dark. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Simply removed from operational reality. Commander Relic felt his throat tighten as he stared at the display. It didn't overpower it, he said slowly. It didn't even destroy it. A technician whispered, it disconnected it from command authority. That's not a weapon interaction, another officer added nervously. That's system-level rewriting. On the main screen, the Eternum remained centered within the fractured Dominion formation. Its hull no longer unfolded or shifted. It was still again, but the stillness had changed. It was no longer passive. It was controlled. Like something had finished a calculation and was waiting for confirmation. Then the human voice returned. Cold, measured, absolute. All hostile assets classified under Dominion protocol. A pause. Engagement outcome predetermined. Relic's eyes narrowed, predetermined. Before anyone could respond, the Eternum emitted a low-frequency pulse. It did not travel through space like a conventional wave. It spread through systems. Every Dominion ship in the rift flickered simultaneously. Shields stuttered. Weapon locks desynchronized. Navigation systems briefly inverted reference coordinates. For half a second, the entire Dominion fleet lost internal coherence. And in that half-second, the Eternum struck. It did not fire across distance. It simply executed presence. 17 Dominion cruisers vanished from existence in perfect geometric spacing, as if someone had erased specific points on a diagram. No explosions followed. No debris fields formed. Only empty gaps where coordinated warships had been. Relic stepped back instinctively. It's not targeting ships, he said. It's targeting structure. A technician shook his head. That's impossible. You can't erase formation logic with physical weaponry. Then it isn't physical, Relic replied quietly. The Dominion commander finally broke silence on their internal channel. Re-establish fleet cohesion. All units maintain formation integrity. Do not think individually. But something had already changed. The fleet was no longer behaving as one organism. It was reacting as fragments. Fear and emotion the Dominion had long engineered out of its war doctrine began to surface in unpredictable micro-behaviors. Ships hesitated, some drifted, others overcorrected weapon fire. Entire wings began to lose synchronization timing. The Eternum had not destroyed their army. It had disrupted their unity. And that was far worse. Inside the human ship, systems pulsed in layered sequences. Deep within its core, something massive rotated, not mechanically, but conceptually, like a decision engine operating on scales too large for normal comprehension. The human voice returned again. Dominion fleet coherence reduced below threshold. A pause. Initiating directive cascade. Alliance officers exchanged confused glances. Directive cascade, one repeated. What does that even mean? No one had an answer, because at that exact moment, the Eternum stopped engaging individual targets. Instead, it emitted a field that expanded across the battlefield in controlled waves. Where it passed, Dominion ships did not explode. They simply stopped receiving orders. Relic watched in growing disbelief as entire sections of the enemy fleet drifted into silence. Weapon systems powered down. Engines idled. Shield grids collapsed not from damage, but from loss of authorization. "It's shutting them down," he whispered. A technician shook his head rapidly. "No, it's not shutting them down physically. It's revoking their command permissions at source level." Relic turned sharply. "Explain that." "The Dominion fleet, it runs on hierarchical command authentication. If you break the top-level directive chain..." He trailed off, realizing the implication mid-sentence. "You collapse the entire military structure." Relic's eyes widened. "And that ship is doing it how?" No answer came, because the Eternum had begun targeting something deeper. Far behind the Dominion fleet, within encrypted subspace channels, something massive began responding. A signal, not from a ship, from an infrastructure layer. The Dominion's true war intelligence network, hidden across folded dimensions. And it was waking up. On the Eternum, alarms that no one in the Alliance could interpret briefly flickered. The human voice returned. This time quieter, more precise. Secondary Dominion intelligence substrate detected. A pause. High-order war cognition present. Relic felt a chill crawl up his spine. High-order cognition. Before anyone could ask what that meant, space behind the Dominion fleet tore open. Not like a warp gate, like something breathing through reality for the first time in centuries. And from it, something began to look back at the Eternum. The tier in space did not open like a normal jump point. It unfolded, layer by layer, as if reality itself was being peeled back to reveal something that had always been underneath. At first, it looked like darkness, then structure, then purpose. A vast formation emerged from the subspace breach, too large to be a single fleet, too organized to be a natural phenomenon. It was not entering the battlefield. It was returning to it. Commander Relic felt his throat tighten. That's not Dominion's standard architecture. A tactical officer leaned forward, scanning rapidly. No registry match, no known energy signature profiles. It's older, much older. Another voice cut in, shaken. It's not just older, it's different. The construction logic doesn't match any current galactic engineering paradigm. On the main display, the new arrivals expanded into full formation. Hundreds, no, thousands of vessels. But calling them vessels felt wrong. They were arranged in impossible geometric layers, like a living mathematical structure suspended in space. Their hulls were not uniform metal plating, but shifting composites of dark alloy and luminous seams that pulsed in slow synchronization. And at the center of it all, a core command structure larger than any known capital ship. Relic's voice dropped. "What are we looking at?" No one answered immediately, because the Dominion fleet had stopped firing entirely. Even they did not recognize what had arrived. Then the Dominion commander spoke across open channels, voice tight for the first time since the war began. Impossible, that classification was erased. A pause, then quieter. Human Archive Fleet. Alliance officers turned sharply. "What did he say?" someone asked. "Human," another repeated. "That's not human design. Humans never had fleets like that." But the Dominion commander continued, voice trembling slightly. They were erased after the first expansion collapse. Entire records purged, every surviving vessel classified as existential risk. Relic's eyes narrowed. The humans had this. Before anyone could respond, the archive fleet moved. Not forward, not aggressively, but into alignment with the Eternum, like it had been waiting for that exact moment. The battlefield shifted again. The Dominion Relic-class wreckage, still drifting, still disabled, flickered once. Then disintegrated completely. Not destroyed. Corrected out of relevance. The new fleet had not fired a single shot. And yet the Dominion's most powerful weapon had ceased to matter. A heavy silence spread through both armies. The Eternum finally responded. Its voice echoed across all channels. Archive protocols confirmed active. A pause. Continuity restored. Relic felt a cold realization forming. Continuity of what? The answer did not come from the humans. It came from the Dominion fleet. Their systems began broadcasting emergency historical fragments, data they had not intended to expose. Encrypted records, old war logs, pre-Dominion intelligence classifications. And buried within them, a name, not a species, a designation. Humanity, S-Class War Contingency Entity. Relic stared at the readout. What does S-Class mean? A technician swallowed hard. It means they were never part of the normal war classification system. Another added, almost whispering. It means they were considered a response to something worse than the Dominion. The battlefield went quiet again. Then the Archive fleet began activating. One by one, its vessels unfolded new systems, arrays that did not resemble weapons but containment frameworks. Fields of structured light expanded outward, intersecting Dominion formations without firing a shot. And wherever they passed, Dominion ships began shutting down. Not destroyed, not damaged, deauthorized. Their systems simply stopped recognizing themselves as valid military entities. Panic spread across the Dominion formation like wildfire. For the first time in the entire war, their coordination failed completely. Ships attempted to reconnect to command chains that no longer responded. Entire wings drifted into confusion, unable to distinguish friend from formation. Relic's voice was barely audible. They're collapsing. A technician nodded slowly. Not physically, structurally. It's like their entire war network is being invalidated. Then the Eternum spoke again. This sector is now under human continuity enforcement. A pause. All unauthorized military constructs will be neutralized. The Dominion commander's voice broke through, louder now. Engage emergency protocol. Activate prime directive countermeasure. But something was wrong. The command did not propagate properly. Because deep within Dominion space itself, the prime directive had never been designed to handle what had just arrived. And somewhere inside the Archive fleet, something far larger than any of them began to awaken in response to that command. The Dominion's emergency command did not spread like a signal. It fractured. Across their entire network, systems attempted to interpret the prime directive countermeasure order, but for the first time in their history, there was no unified response. Each ship translated the command differently. Each subsystem argued with itself. Entire fleets hesitated in mid-alignment, unsure whether they were executing an attack, a retreat, or a self-preservation protocol. And that hesitation was fatal. Commander Relic watched as the Dominion formation, once the most disciplined military structure in the galaxy, began to unravel in real time. They're breaking, he whispered. A technician shook his head. Not breaking, losing hierarchy coherence. On the main display, the Archive fleet continued its advance. Silent, perfect, unshaken by resistance. Wherever its containment fields passed, Dominion vessels stopped being combat units and reverted into inert constructs, ships without war permission drifting like dead thoughts. But then space changed again. A low vibration spread through the Carthos rift. Not energy, not communication. Something deeper. Relic felt it in his teeth before the sensors even registered it. What is that? He asked sharply. No one answered, because the answer was arriving behind the Dominion fleet. A massive distortion formed, larger than the previous Relic-class emergence, but fundamentally different in shape. This was not a constructed weapon or a fleet formation. It was a sealed law being reopened. Space tore open like a wound that refused to stay hidden. And from it emerged the ancient counterweapon. At first glance, it looked like a planet breaking free from orbit. But as it stabilized, its true nature became clear. It was not a ship. It was a contained phenomenon, a sphere of layered megastructure wrapped around something at its core that should never have been awakened. Its surface pulsed with faint, irregular light patterns, like a dying civilization still trying to communicate through architecture instead of language. Relic's voice dropped. That's not Dominion tech. A technician checked readings twice, then again. It predates them, he said slowly, by a lot. Another officer leaned forward. How much? The technician hesitated. Before interstellar expansion records, before known hyperspace mapping, before most recorded civilizations had space travel capability. A silence followed that felt heavier than the rift itself. Then the Dominion commander's voice returned across all channels, strained and no longer fully controlled. We have no alternative. Deploy the countermeasure. The ancient counterweapon responded. Not with sound, not with movement, but with presence recognition. The moment it fully stabilized, the Carthos rift itself seemed to bend away from it. Space around the object lost definition. Stars behind it dimmed, as if refusing to be observed in its proximity. And then it activated. A pulse expanded outward. Not fast, not slow. Inevitable. The archive fleet reacted instantly. Containment arrays expanded in overlapping layers, forming a lattice of counterstructures designed to intercept, absorb, and neutralize large-scale spatial disruption. For the first time since their arrival, they were responding defensively. Relic's eyes widened. Even the archive fleet is reacting to it. The pulse hit the first containment layer and passed through it. No resistance. No distortion. Just passage. A technician cursed under his breath. It's not energy-based, it's conceptual interference. What does that mean? Relic snapped. It means it doesn't interact with defenses. It interacts with definitions. The second containment layer activated. Then the third. Then the fourth. Each one failed in a different way. Some dissolved, some inverted, some simply stopped existing as valid constructs. The archive fleet began to reorganize rapidly, adapting faster than any known military AI system should have been capable of. But the pulse was already halfway through the battlefield. On Dominion ships, alarms became incoherent. Systems reported contradictions. Target EXISDS/target does not exist. Weapon active/weapon inactive. Friend/enemy undefined. Entire vessels began to freeze, unable to resolve their own status. Relic stepped back slightly. It's breaking classification logic. Then his voice dropped. It's rewriting what they are allowed to be. On the Eternum, the human voice returned, but this time it was different. Lower, focused, almost cautious. Ancient counterweapon identified. A pause. Pre-continuity threat confirmed. Alliance officers exchanged uneasy looks. Pre-what? Someone whispered. Before anyone could answer, the archive fleet responded in full. For the first time, it stopped being purely defensive. Vessels rotated into a vast formation pattern that resembled a containment sigil stretching across space. Energy channels ignited across hundreds of ships simultaneously, forming a structured barrier not around themselves, but around the entire battlefield. Relic's eyes widened. They're trying to seal it off. A technician nodded quickly. They're not fighting it, they're isolating it from reality flow. The ancient counterweapon continued, advancing through the containment lattice. Slowly, unstoppably, each layer of resistance bent, cracked, or collapsed, but the archive fleet kept rebuilding faster than it failed. Then the Eternum moved for the first time since the archive fleet arrived. Not toward the counterweapon, but toward the center of the battlefield. Relic's voice sharpened. Why is it moving away from the threat? No one answered. Because the human ship was heading toward something else. Something even the archive fleet had not fully accounted for. And deep within the Dominion remnants, a hidden failsafe, older than the war itself, finally triggered its final sequence. The Carthos Rift was no longer a battlefield. It had become a layered collapse of systems. Dominion command failure, archive fleet containment grids, and the slow, unstoppable advance of the ancient counterweapon, all converging into a single unstable reality. And at the center of it all, the Eternum moved. Not away from danger. Not toward it, but toward the origin point of everything that was now waking up. Commander Relic's hands tightened on the rail as he watched the tactical feed. "Where is it going?" he asked. A technician zoomed the projection in, confusion spreading across his face. "It's not targeting a ship, it's targeting a signal source." "Signal source," Relic repeated. The technician hesitated. "There's a deep-layer broadcast node embedded in the battlefield infrastructure. Ancient Dominion systems, but also something older beneath it." Before anyone could respond, the archive fleet reacted sharply. For the first time, their formation broke symmetry. Not into chaos, but into defensive redirection. Relic felt a chill. They're afraid of that signal too. On every screen, the ancient counterweapon pulsed again, pushing further into the containment lattice. Archive vessels burned energy in synchronized waves, struggling to hold it in place. Entire sections of space looked like reality was being stretched between opposing truths. And still the Eternum advanced. Inside its hull, systems no one in the Alliance could fully interpret began to synchronize at a deeper level. Not weapons charging, not shields reinforcing. Something more fundamental. A memory system. A continuity core. Then the human voice returned across all channels. No longer calm. No longer procedural. Heavier. Older. Continuity breach confirmed. A pause. Earth directive engaged. Relic froze, Earth. The word didn't belong in galactic warfare logs. It wasn't a classification. It wasn't a fleet designation. It sounded like something personal. Before anyone could ask what it meant, space behind the entire battlefield went silent. Not visually. Conceptually. Every sensor across Dominion, Alliance, and Archive systems registered the same anomaly at once. A missing coordinate. Something that should have always been there, suddenly was. And then it returned. Not as a ship. Not as a fleet. But as a presence encoded into the battlefield itself. A distant transmission layer activated. And every surviving system, Dominion, Archive, and even Alliance, received the same incoming signal. No encryption. No language barrier. Just structured intent. Relic's eyes widened. That signature, it's human. The projection resolved. And for the first time since the war began, the galaxy saw it. Not the Eternum. Not the Archive fleet. But something beyond both. A vast, distributed network of dormant constructs awakening across interstellar space. Not deployed from the battlefield, but activated from elsewhere. From hidden infrastructures buried in dead systems, abandoned colonies, and erased star charts. The Dominion commander's voice broke through one final time. "This is impossible. We purged every trace of them." But the network responded anyway. And the human voice spoke again. "This is not an invasion." A pause. "This is continuity restoration." Then the signal expanded. Across the Carthos Rift, the ancient counterweapon hesitated for the first time. Its pulse slowed. Its advance fractured slightly as the Archive fleet adjusted containment patterns instantly. Relic felt something shift in his chest. Because now the battlefield was no longer three forces. It was something else entirely. The Dominion, fighting to survive its own past. The Archive fleet, trying to contain a threat older than recorded history. And humanity, responding from a layer of existence no one had realized was still active. The Eternum finally reached the signal source. And stopped. Directly above it. The hull opened. Not like a weapon preparing to fire, but like a seal being removed. Inside, there was no core reactor visible. Only a suspended sphere of deep, dark structure, quiet, dormant, waiting. Relic whispered, "What is that?" A technician scanned it, voice trembling. It's not a weapon core, it's a storage node. For what? The answer came not from the Alliance, but from the human voice itself. Earth Core Archive. A pause. Memory of origin conflict retained. Then, for the first time in the entire war, the ancient counterweapon stopped moving. The archive fleet went completely still. Even the Dominion remnants froze in place. Because something in the battlefield had just been recognized at the deepest possible level of reality. The Eternum activated the core, and space folded inward, not destructively but reconstructively.